the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt and Stephen Molyneux.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Arabian Racehorse Podcast. I'm joined as usual by Stephen Molyneux from Dubai. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. We're edging ever closer to your season over there, as we've just been discussing off camera. And how are things looking there?
Yeah, just only a month away now. So I think a few of the jockeys will be arriving in 10 days or so. Horses, new horses getting trialled and all that goes before the start of the season. So yeah, we should be soon underway.
Good, and that's quite a big deal out there, the trials and so on. They all get a go at jumping out of the stalls and things at Meydan. Is that right?
Yeah, there's various trials set up, not just Meydan, Al Ain, Sharjah, Jebel Ali even this year will be. I think each unraced horse, whether it be Arabians or thoroughbreds, have to either have 2 stall tests, which can be done privately at their own track, but obviously not everybody has access to stalls, or the official starter Shane Reinl. There are these 2 trials that a steward has to pass each horse, and I think they have to gallop 3 furlongs or 600 metres satisfactorily. And I think most trainers see it as a good way of getting a bit of experience into the horse, and more than anything, it ensures that the Arabians, who can be a bit tricky, or thoroughbreds as well, I suppose, that they actually, when they do race for the first time, they've got experience of the stalls, they know what they look like, and probably a bit of a safety issue for the stalls teams as well.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a very sensible idea, really, from my perspective. Anyway, so today we're going to be looking at 2 races which quite obviously are going to have a bit of collateral form between them. Our last race, which was at Wolverhampton, the Wafba Stallions Cup, a 0 to 55 handicap run over just short of a mile and a quarter, which was won by Heritage Valentino. And then we'll move on to our next race, which will be at Southwell, where obviously Heritage Valentino makes a quick reappearance along with several other of those runners. So what did you make of the race at Wolverhampton?
Yeah, it was a case of Heritage Valentino sort of confirming the return to form, really, that he'd sort of threatened, particularly on his 3rd and 4th starts. He took a while to get into his season with a couple of disappointing enough runs, and slipped a little bit in the weights, but the second at Chepstow behind Aloof rather suggested that he was in very good form, and he was able to defy a £3 higher mark at Wolverhampton, and did it fairly decisively as well. I think he very much got the run of things. That should never be underestimated in his victory. He was soon out in front under Kieran O'Neill, and I think was able to dictate more than anything, and those further back struggled to get involved, particularly Aloof, who I thought shaped as though still in form, and pretty much all of the first 5 really, well, certainly the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, they all deserved a little bit of credit, I thought. All in all, a solid enough race, even if it was perhaps just nicked from the front by a horse who'd been edging back to form and certainly deserved the win.
And I thought that obviously, full marks to Al Jawahir again. Super consistent horse. What a lovely horse. Wouldn't you want to own him, really? I mean, he always shows up, runs his race. Obviously, Kayak was coming back in after a break and will be showing up again this week at Southwell. Obviously, I think that one probably might have been a bit closer had it had a run under its belt. What did you think of that one?
Yeah, Kayak was just, I thought, tended to hang left as well. Otherwise, had he had a clear run at things, then certainly could have given the winner, I would say give the winner a bit to think about, but certainly Kayak could probably have challenged Al Jawahir for 2nd. Obviously, the absence as well maybe just told a little bit in the end, but it was another solid run by Al Jawahir, as we say, more seconds than Oliver Twist this season. Kayak, good reappearance. Interesting to see if he can build on that at Southwell. First signs of life from Belle Angelique as well, back and forth. Obviously, a horse that's had 1 or 2 stumbles along the way, was pulled up a couple of starts ago. No real threat at Chepstow last time, but had shaped in maidens and first handicap start at Brighton as though she had ability, and I thought she showed a lot more of that at Wolverhampton. And as I say, that quintet, who were clear of the rest, completed by Aloof, who well fancied to complete the treble. Probably a combination of a rise in the weights and the fact that on this occasion just couldn't get away with getting behind in the early stages. She'd been able to quicken from the back at Chepstow and Brighton, but probably just a different track, the different surface at Wolverhampton, that just played against her. So I left her on the same mark simply because I didn't think it was a race that saw her to best effect. So it'll be interesting to see probably next year now whether she can return and continue on her progressive way.
Yeah, and I mean, that's going to looking at those two horses in particular, very much an improved run, I thought, from Belle Angelique. And she was ridden differently this time. She raced prominently, whereas before she's always either been slow away or sort of held up at the back. And I think that probably made a difference. She certainly, it's probably the best run she's ever put in, I would think, really. And then going back to Aloof, interestingly, when Josh Bryan got off of her at Chepstow, bearing in mind that he'd ridden her last year as well, he said that he felt that she appreciated the rising ground, and that helped her a lot. And obviously Wolverhampton, it's a flat track effectively, and that probably didn't play to her strengths as well, I suspect. But I certainly, as you say, she was never going to really come off that pace, was she, with that horse, certainly with Heritage Valentino in command all the way?
No, I mean, it was the way Wolverhampton's been riding. Obviously, we've had the heat, and it does affect the surface, and it's just looked very difficult to come off the pace, whether you're thoroughbreds or Arabians. And I think that allied with the pace just completely went against Aloof. So yeah, definitely give her another chance. On the turf, probably. And as you say, those tracks, those stiffer finishes, they do look to suit her well. She's certainly the horse who's probably got a best days ahead of her still. And as you mentioned with Belle Angelique as well, she certainly went with a lot more enthusiasm, being ridden more prominently. Not quite sure what the reason was for her pulling up, but it did feel as though it was maybe a case of a lack of enthusiasm at the time. But she certainly showed a lot more for being handy in that race at Wolverhampton.
And we'll now look ahead to our next race, the Emirates Breeders Handicap over 0-75. Our last race, obviously, is a novice race coming up the following week. But so we're back at Southall, and Heritage Valentino. Here he goes again. I mean, he's stepping up in trip. Obviously, I mean, most of the horses declared a stepping up to this trip for the first time. Heritage Valentino did run actually over 2 miles and a furlong. But it was his first run of the season when he was well beaten by G1 at Bath in, when was it, June, I think. Do you think that, I mean, when Kieran got off him, he said that the horse wasn't stopping at the line. So do you think that, he's got the chance to progress in this higher grade?
Yeah, I think so. As you say, it wasn't kept on grinding out to Wolverhampton, really, and has finished third over 1.5 miles at Southall. That was a good effort, just kept going that day as well. And like you say, the defeat at Bath over 2 miles on his reappearance could easily be of excuse. 373 days off going into that race. So yeah, I just think now that he's found his form going into the end of the season, that he'll be a big threat again. Obviously carries a £6 penalty, given that the entries for this race were put out before the handicap mark changes were taking place on the Tuesday. I only assessed his victory as he's only gone up £5 basically from Wolverhampton, so he will be £1 wrong officially, but that's neither here nor there. And the good run of form that he had going into Wolverhampton, I see no reason why he won't continue that at Southall in a couple of days' time. And
obviously, the one horse who, as we just said, is proven at the trip is G1. He comes here after a little bit of a break. He's also, I mean, he's got some fair form in his youth. I mean, he was fourth at Wolverhampton when still owned by Sheikh Hamdan and trained by Phil Collington, beating horses like Durga Mathba, who has, as we know, run very well in the UAE, also ran well at the Saudi Cup meeting, and that's quite a feather in his cap, really, when you look at the quality of the horses he's racing against here.
Yeah, he obviously ranked highly based on the fact that he won that Bath race over 2 miles. Al Jawahir was in second, so we know the form is very solid. Got the back class, as you mentioned, going back a couple of seasons, and indeed last season. And I think his 2 defeats this season have been easily excusable. One of them came over 1 mile behind Rebel Afbar, who we know obviously young and an exposed horse, and last time maybe just found the 1.25 miles a bit too sharp. But again, it was a it was a stronger race that Paramount Angel won at Newbury, and dropping back in grade. Well, it's not dropping back in grade, but it feels as though it is. Bearing in mind the sort of the depth of quality of horse. You know, he was running up against the likes of Balkis and Tijari that day, who were both rated 77. So it does feel like an easier race at Silverwall, proven over the distance. So yeah, should be bang there really.
And that's my one concern about Heritage Valentino, is he's pretty much stuck in his grade, and this is a big jump up for him. Although a lot of those horses he's sort of raced against before, and certainly a bit lower down, you'd expect him to probably, you know, beat the likes of Labwa again, for example. But anyway, we'll go on to another James Owen. James Owen's got 3 in the race, and he's also got the top weight Alma Buba, a horse we've discussed as being very consistent this year. She's trying this trip for the first time. What would you think of her in this race?
Yeah, I mean, running style, she doesn't necessarily strike me as though she's going to be suited by this longer trip. But I think going back over pretty much all of her runs this season, she has been ridden to sort of try and make best use of her experience more than anything else. And they've almost tried to nick races from the front with her. So I wouldn't necessarily hold her running style and the fact that she doesn't always see her races out as necessarily gospel that she's not going to see out this longer trip. I just think that they can maybe hold on to her a little bit longer out in front, and she gets into a bit more of a rhythm. It's certainly her easiest race to date, you know, bearing in mind that she's finished placed in 3 either maidens or novice events, 2 handicap runs, have been bang there. We know where we are with regards to her handicap mark. So I just think a lot of her chance is going to be what she does in the first half of the race, and if she can be well settled. She's also got the benefit of a £5 claim on again, which she's only had once, I think, this season, which came in a maiden. So from a handicapping point of view, I think she's bang there, effectively a mark of 65 here. It's just whether she sees out this longer trip.
Yeah, and she's very closely related to James's other runner, Jahez, who is a horse who is always seemed very much more comfortable at 1.25 miles. As have a lot of that family that out of the mares Eva, other than her first 2 foals, which were Al-Rahi and Azizi, who were by Monsieur Almori. And they both won the Stayers race on Dubai Day, which at that point was over 1 mile and 5 furlongs. So there is the possibility that they might find some more stamina, but they just don't seem like so far that the step up and trip is necessarily going to suit them. But of course, as you say, it's a slightly easier race. Both horses have been rated higher than this. I mean, Jahez did run over 1 mile and 5.5 furlongs in, I think it was Holland and Dungey a few years ago, and was well beaten then. So that's probably a little bit of a question mark over his stamina. How would you see his chances?
Yeah, he's got 1 run over 1.5 miles, I think, in the UK, which wasn't too bad either. But, you know, we are dealing with a little bit further. Again, he's been solid enough this year in handicaps without really threatening to win one, if truth be told. He's got those 3 placed efforts, but never really got to within 3 lengths of winning a race. Again, this is probably easier. Slipped a little bit in the weights as well. Had an enforced absence, having missed the Brighton race due to not entering the stall. So maybe just come into this a little bit fresher. So from a class angle, I could certainly give him a chance. Trip probably going to be okay as well. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't rule him out at all.
And I suppose that is a very valid point, actually, is that, you know, he did refuse to go into the stalls at Brighton. So but certainly, obviously, Ria, who rides him, obviously works for James, so should have his measure this time, you would think.
Yeah, hopefully it was just a one-off. He's never done it before, and probably just didn't like the sea air at Brighton, so Southern might be more to his liking.
Well, yeah. And one horse that did run in that Brighton race, of course, was Zayn's Hyperion. He's been pretty consistent this season, as he was last year. Obviously, he's got another win under his belt. Jerry Haynes obviously knows him really well. He's another one stepping up. He's been campaigned exclusively over shorter trips, but although, to be fair, that's kind of been how the programme book has forced his hand to a little bit. And of course, his half brother Zayn's Achilles was basically a 7 furlong horse, all liked a bit of a trip. He's you know, so he's a half brother to a winner at this trip, so he could well step up on this first attempt.
Yeah, his career has largely been one of progression, really. Took a couple of starts in each of his seasons to find his feet, and then won twice last year, and he's had his win this year. £6 higher mark in theory, he's perhaps just caught him out the last twice, but at Lingfield last time it was probably a difficult race for him, just a 3 round. Obviously, Rebel Athbar was a class apart, and even the second horse, Zayn Ankor Centurion, was rated significantly higher than Zayn Zyperian. And although he was beaten, I think it was nearly 10 lengths in the end, for the most part, he didn't look as though he was going to finish any worse than 3 or 4 lengths off them. So I thought he was better than the Bear result, probably still in form, and this definitely represents a drop in grade for him. Trip-wise, I'd be neither here nor there. If you're enough pedigree, like you say, then it might be a query. He's never raced beyond 1.25 miles, but did win that 1.25 mile race at Lingfield. So if they went steady enough early on, then he'd have a chance, I suppose, tactically. James Owen holds the key to a degree. Alma Buba could go forward, and if he feels that his best chance of winning the race is he's basically drawing the stamina out of the likes of Zayn Zyperian, then they might go a good pace. But I still think this horse is in form, and if he stays, should be in the first 3.
And then a bit lower down, we've got Kamikaze, who's coming back, well, off a huge absence, and pretty much ran like that when we saw him last week at Wolverhampton.
Yeah, also a different trainer. Obviously used to be with Adam Newey back in the day, where all his best form came around. Well, I was classed his best form as being around 7 and a mile, bearing in mind that he won the Premier Handicap at Newbury once. But he did race. He's raced over a variety of distances. So perhaps a mile and 6, being a 14-year-old, shouldn't be too much of an issue for him. But realistically, didn't see enough in that performance last week, and this does represent a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, you really want to have seen a few more runs under his belt before he stepped up to this trip for this year. And of course, down the bottom, we've got Labois. At the moment, there's no jockey for her. She's been a bit disappointing. I mean, she's bred to be a sort of miler. But again, another stepping up to the trip. We might see a bit more from her this time. And she is running off a very light weight if that turns out to be the case.
Yeah, she's not got too many miles on the clock. I suppose the one glimmer of hope came at Brighton back in May when she was fourth to Aloof over the 7 furlongs. But again, wasn't a great deal of encouragement behind Heritage Valentino last week. So a step up in trip is really going to need to suit. And I think both her and Kamikaze, had this race enabled them to race off reassessed marks, they would be a little bit lower in the weight. So she's not got the easiest of tasks, but yeah, I suppose the trip would be the one hope in her finding a bit of improvement.
So that wraps it all up for today. We're going to end the programme rerunning the National Racehorse Week video that we put together to celebrate all our racehorses last week, and give everyone a chance to see it who might not have seen it in its earlier circulation. So thank you very much, Stephen.
No problem, Debbie, anytime.
And we'll be back next week with the results of this race and looking ahead to what will be our last race of the season. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No problem. Bye-bye.